This computer. All right, 3, 2, 1. Okay, welcome everyone to the meeting for the Irving prototype median project from golf course to the median just west of Timon or Rio de los Pinos Avenue. We are here to look at the landscaping and select landscape materials and design motifs for this project. Want to appreciate or thank everybody for being here. We appreciate you taking your time away from your busy schedules to participate, especially on a weeknight. And we're very happy to have you. We will go through the project details here in just a minute, but first I wanted to take a few minutes for some brief introductions. My name is Brian Verardo. I'm a landscape architect and principal with MRWM Landscape Architects here in Albuquerque. We have the design services contract for the Prototype Medians program through the City of Albuquerque Department of Municipal Development. I'm joined by my colleague, Erin Treviso, who is a landscape architect in our office as well. Erin and I work on many of these projects along with a couple other folks in our office. So we're here to help facilitate the meeting and make sure we get all the information that we need in order to keep things moving with the next steps. I'll also like to introduce the folks from DMD. I'll start with Mark Motzko. I'll let him introduce himself and his team.
Thanks, Brian. Mr. McNatt, you're an audience of one tonight, so you'll get to make all the important decisions. We'll listen to you, and we've had some input from the neighborhood, obviously. But I would just like to take this time to introduce myself. I'm the CIP official with the City of Albuquerque. CIP official just means that we manage all of the capital dollars for the city, whether it's state capital outlay, GO bonds. So that's what we do. Part of our division in municipal development and under CIP is the median landscape program. Anthony Villanueva is joining us tonight. He is my project manager. He's the man in the field. He, as Councilor Borrego mentioned, that the last project we did was great on Taylor Ranch, and he's the reason for that as far as managing the contractor. So a little bit about the median landscape program. Over the last 16 more years through the prototype median program, which started originally in 2004, the city has landscaped over 100 miles of previously undeveloped medians, 10 miles of interstate highway medians and interchanges, and we have planted more than 8,000 new trees in Albuquerque. We still have about 30 miles of undeveloped medians that remain to be landscaped. One of those miles is approximately one of those miles is what we're talking about today. Using this prototype landscapes process, the city can complete projects much faster, a 4 to 6 month time frame versus 1 to 2 years that would take a typical project of design, bid, build. Prototype medians average about $750,000 per roadway mile to construct. And that includes the cost of maintenance and water for the first 2 years. And we'll talk about that here at the end of the program. The city and MRWM have worked with contractors and maintenance personnel to determine which plants have the best chance of thriving in these medians, which are obviously in harsher conditions than your backyard garden because they're next to asphalt roadways. And those asphalt roadways reflect the heat back onto the plants, and we got vehicle emissions and stuff like that. So these plants that we'll be looking at tonight really have the best chance to thrive, and I think we can see that as we drive around the city this spring. Everything is blooming, and it might make some people's allergies kick up, but at the same time, it's really nice to look at while you're driving along the streets of Albuquerque. And as I mentioned, all projects include a 2-year extended warranty to ensure that the city's investment of live plants is protected and gives the City of Albuquerque maintenance personnel an established landscape to maintain. We're not asking our guys to go out there and baby these plants and everything. We have the professionals to cover them for the first 2 years so that when the city does maintain them, these plants are well taken and have 2 years of growth in them before we maintain them. The extended warranty, and as I mentioned, does include the cost of waters for the first 2 years, as well as costs to apply pre-emergent weed prevention, always a tongue twister, and of course, trash and debris removal. So that's the city side of this. We work with MRWM and like I said, contractors to go in and build these medians with landscaping, and it is a big construction job. And you see that all over the city, and we really appreciate your audience tonight and your input for which plants and trees we're going to be planting here on this section of median. So that's all that we have from the city. I think we're going to go back to Brian, and he'll be able to tell us about stuff. Hey, Susan.
Hey, I just wanted to note on this video that the Councilor Borrego was just here and welcomed everyone and is really excited about this program, and specifically thanked Janet Tawney, the bee lady, as we affectionately call her. And I am here to work in some pollinator species, just in my, as if they agree with the other participants' comments. So thank you. I'm from Councilor Borrego's office. Nice to see you all.
Thank you, Susan. And thank you, Mark. We'll go ahead and get started now. I'll let Erin go ahead and share your screen, Erin, and we'll put up the presentation graphics. So we'll start by sort of an overview of the project area. And let us know, Mr. McNatt, if you can see the screen.
Yes, I can.
Okay. So this is just our title slide. Let's go to the next one, Erin, please. So this may be a little hard to see on the screen, but we're trying to outline and show the project limits here. So on the right-hand side of the screen, which would be the east end of the project limits, is Golf Course Road. And of course, we're looking at all of the medians from Golf Course west to the first median, which is really the last median of this section of medians, that is west of Timmon Avenue on the south side, and I believe it's Rio de los Pinos on the north side. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 medians total. There's some short ones, some long ones. So this is the limits of the project that we'll be looking at this evening. Before we get into a lot of detail, I do want to look and zero in on this first median immediately adjacent to Golf Course. So Erin, if you could go to the next slide, please.
I'm sorry. Can I just interrupt to clarify that it's not just from Timmon to Golf Course, but it's all the way up to De Los Pinos? Is that the right word?
Yeah, let's go back to that last slide, Erin, if you would. So yeah, so Timmon is here and Rio de los Pinos is the same street. It's just, it gets named differently on the north side. And so we're going to this last median. I don't know if you can see my cursor or my, yeah, I guess Erin's got his hand showing on there now. But that's the last median. Beyond there, there are no medians. So we're really landscaping all of the medians in this segment. So let's go ahead and go to the Golf Course median. So this median, you're probably familiar with. It's immediately west of Golf Course Road. It has artificial turf and some gravel mulches and plants in it. This was completed outside of the prototype median program in 2007. It was sort of designed, I think, as a separate prototype, if you will, to experiment with the idea of using fewer plants and using synthetic turf as a possibility for medians. In fact, there was a design that included all these medians that we're talking about this evening to be completed as artificial turf medians. This initial one was installed, I think, as a prototype, and the rest of the medians were not completed. What was completed, though, is the irrigation. So they do have irrigation main line and valve boxes, remote control valves within each of the medians. So that'll make our job a little bit easier, or the contractor's job a little bit easier when we get out there. One of the things we wanted to just discuss this evening is getting some feedback about whether there's a desire to leave this median as artificial turf or to replace it with a new prototype median landscape. So a couple of things I'd point out about the artificial turf median. Because it was built in 2007, Most of the synthetic turf that is on the market these days has a lifespan in our climate of anywhere from 10 to 15 years. And that's mostly based on breakdown due to ultraviolet rays in our sort of high desert climate where we've got high altitude and we're a little closer to the sun. So the expected life expectancy of that turf is sort of reaching its end. It's obviously not a turf that people are using for sports or any sort of activity. It's more of a visual installation in this case, but we could expect to see that turf start to break down over time in the next few years. So it's something that I wanted to just bring up here. There is irrigation there. There are some viable plants that are in the median, but there's several plants that were originally planted that have died and have not been replaced. So the question really this evening is there a preference to either keep this median as it is or to replace it with new landscaping consistent with the rest of the medians that we'll be developing? So Mr. McNatt, what are your thoughts since you live in the area and are representing the neighborhood tonight? Do you have any thoughts on this median?
Well, first of all, he started off by breaking down the cost and upkeep of the mediums. My concern always is first safety. How many lanes will coexist once the mediums are redone or what have you? Or do they exist now? How many lanes are these? One lane going each way or two lanes going each way or what? That's the first question. And the second question comes down to average speed in that particular area. I love the refacing work because when we first got here on this corner up here at Uncertain McMahon, there was nothing but a Walgreens there, as I often tell Miss Vigil when we're talking. And now we got all this beautiful landscape going around it, and we got shopping, and we got all these things going on, and we're still trying to define our area. So my most concern, knowing that you guys are expert at what you do, cost has already been discussed. I'm also concerned about speed and how many lanes you got there. And then if this stuff is not going to be beneficial over the next 5 years, I guess you got to replace it. You don't want the trees, you spend all that money on trees and then they die. Another one of my great concerns. So
Sure.
if you can relate to that, then maybe I have more questions.
Yeah, no, those are good questions. So this project is just to landscape the existing medians. We're not changing any of the lane configuration. And right now, Irving Boulevard is 2 lanes in each direction, divided by these medians. And they vary in width up to, I believe, 16 feet. So there's some, again, that are portions that are a little bit narrower, but these are pretty nice, generous width medians. We can expect to have quite a bit of landscaping fit within those using the prototype designs that we'll be reviewing this evening. I think one of the main differences between the prototypes that you'll see tonight and this landscape with the artificial turf is that we focus a lot on trees within the prototype medium program. What's one of the main reasons that it was started was to help improve the overall tree canopy within the city of Albuquerque, which helps to cut down on urban heat island effect, reflective heat, helps to shade the roadway, helps to cool the city in general. The more tree square footage of tree canopy we have, the better. It also has some other environmental benefits such as carbon sequestration, and then some of the sort of ancillary benefits with some of the understory plants, the smaller shrubs and flowering plants. They can create wildlife habitat and provide habitat for pollinators and things like that. So there's a lot of benefits that these medians have. This artificial turf, although it looks nice and green, is really pretty artificial, and there's not a lot of living plant material left. In fact, that artificial turf does kind of reflect a lot of heat. So one of the things that I think I would say is that the difference between this type of landscape and the type of landscape that we would be proposing with the prototype program would be you'll have more shade canopy or tree canopy, which will definitely contribute to reducing the overall heat island effect within Albuquerque, whereas this median just by itself probably doesn't do a whole lot one way or the other, but it's certainly working in the opposite direction.
Okay, another question. What is your foot traffic like along there? I see something that looks like a sidewalk and some homes and stuff like that? What is your foot traffic like?
So there are sidewalks on both sides of the street through, I think, most, if not all of this stretch of Irving. There are some apartments immediately due north of Irving. I don't know how much people use the street frontage there. When I used to live in Ventana Ranch, I used to traverse this road quite a bit, and I don't recall seeing a lot of foot traffic there. But there is, I think, adequate opportunity for pedestrians outside, certainly outside of the median. We definitely don't want them trying to cross through the median in these areas. So there's adequate crossings at the intersections and sidewalks on either side of the road.
Now, not that I'm totally familiar with it, I've probably been through there and didn't pay it any attention. With all the foot traffic, is it all residential or is there some commercial involved in there anywhere where you guys talking about working?
I think it's mostly residential. There may be down at the corner, obviously, across golf course, there's some commercial, but I don't think anywhere else along Irving in this stretch. I think it's all either apartments or single family residential.
Okay, and animals, I have a big problem. Miss Borrego and them just had a lot of work to do over there because of the animal waste and stuff like that. And it calls for them going in and spending a lot of money to have that redone. And I'm kind of concerned in these neighborhoods how the animals are being handled with the neighbors who are taking their dogs out for the walk, which urination alone will kill a plant, you know. Don't even have to go to the other level. It will kill a plant if it gets down in the soil. So those are some of the questions I can pose to help your project because, like, as Miss, I'll say Susan, not to be impolite. No, I'm very interested in the Irving Street corridor and what's going on there, along with quite a few other things. So I want to hear what you guys got to say. If there's anything else I can relate to before you move on to the next slide.
No, I think those are good comments. Again, I think because there's adequate opportunities for pedestrians outside of the medians, we don't anticipate a lot of foot traffic. In fact, we discourage people from walking through these medians to the extent that we can. There will be maintenance, City of Albuquerque maintenance personnel or the contractor's maintenance personnel during that first 2-year warranty. And these medians, I feel, are nice and wide. One of the things that we try to do when we have wider medians is most of the landscaping is sort of focused down the middle of the median, which means there's even more safety buffers on either side. So the people working, some of the medians we do in more urban parts of town, like on Central Avenue, are very narrow. And it's very dangerous to be working out there. And we're always concerned about the maintenance folks when they're on those narrow medians with cars zipping by. But here, although I'm sure speeds tend to get a little higher than they probably should, there's definitely a nice, wide, safe area for the folks to work.
Well, you guys are getting the work done. I'm not arguing with that point. It's just that here, Albuquerque and New Mexico have a very, very bad driving safety record, and more pedestrians are getting killed every day. And I've never agreed with that. I never approved of that. As a matter of fact, I've been trying to move these governors to do something about it, this legislation, to let this happen or let it continuously happen. So even when it comes down to a medium, I have to contemplate the fact I see a major artery here crossing where you guys are going to be working this golf course, which I travel that all the time. We travel that all the time, you know, and since I've been riding the Sun Van, I've seen an awful lot more of the city because these guys will take me places I wouldn't normally go and I get to see things. So, and all in all, that's all the questions and comments I can make on what's already been presented. Let me see what else is coming forward.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate your comment about vehicle safety. One of the things that we should point out is when we lay these medians out, and what we're going to do tonight is look at a prototype design, which is not site specific, but it's sort of a generic design that then we apply to these medians, and we look at the unique characteristics of each median and each project. One of the things we look very carefully at is what's called a clear sight triangle. So where vehicles may be making a turning movement from one of the side streets onto Irving or from Irving onto one of the side streets, we want to make sure that any of the landscaping that's installed is not going to obstruct their view shed for either oncoming vehicles or pedestrians that may be crossing those intersections. So we look at that sort of as part of what we do in our next steps behind the scenes, but I want to make sure that you know, and the other folks that may be watching this know, that is an important aspect of what we do. Is we always want these landscapes, although it's important for them to be beautiful, the very most important thing is that they don't create any sort of hazards or safety issues with vehicles and pedestrians. So I appreciate your comments.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm ready for the next part, guys.
Okay, let's go to the next one, Erin. So what we'll be looking at here is a summary of the prototype medians that we've developed in consultation with the city over many years. As Mark mentioned, this program's been in existence for 16 plus years now. It started in 2004. So these designs have evolved over time. We're really trying to, again, mostly focus on the tree canopy, but beneath the tree canopy, we also want to have some visual interest with some of the smaller plants. So you'll see a variety of these medians that we'll show you. And I know they're a little hard to see at this scale, but we'll be zooming into these here as we go through the presentation. So I'll just kind of quickly go through these to describe some of the key differences between them. You'll notice all of them start with the word trees because, again, the emphasis is primarily on tree canopy improvement. So the first one is called Trees with Vertical Shrubs. As this name suggests, it's a combination of trees and some what we call vertical shrubs, which are sort of narrow, more upright growth habit plants. They're generally larger than most of the shrubs that you would see that hover around a 3-foot range. These vertical shrubs may go in some cases up to 8 or 10 feet in height, but they generally have a very narrow growth habit. Those vertical shrubs are plants that we usually try to use on medians that are a little bit narrower than this, but it's certainly one of the palettes that we can use for this project if somebody really is adamant about it or really likes this one. The next one on the list is trees with shrub accents. So we'll get into some more detail when we zoom in on these here in a minute, but this one is accentuated. The lines of trees are accentuated with sort of groupings of shrubs and cobble mulch and boulders. The next one on the list, trees with formal accents, is really focused primarily on creating this sort of very uniform rows of trees and uniform rows of shrubs. This one works well in some parts of town where you maybe want a more formal appearance to the median, maybe long straight medians instead of curvilinear medians. The one challenge that we found with this particular prototype is those very formal lines of plants look great as long as the plants are living. Over time, we know that some of these shrubs, after the city takes over it in 5 or 10 years, may not survive, and they don't often or always get replaced. And so sometimes when we have those very formal lines and a shrub is missing, it looks a little bit out of order. So that's one just thing to be cognizant of with that prototype. The last one on this page is trees with planting pockets. It has more irregular groupings of trees compared with, for example, the trees with shrub accents that you can see above. It's got sort of smaller groupings of trees, but larger pockets of plantings in the understory with larger cobble mulch beds and boulder arrangements. Erin, let's go to the next one and we'll look at the remaining prototypes. We have another one called Trees with Accent Walls. This is a sort of a little bit more artistic median that includes a low concrete accent or retaining wall that creates a little bit of visual interest and elevation difference. These medians have been installed in lots of parts of town. This was a popular median several years ago. The city's kind of tried to steer away from it, so we usually only use this one where we're either adding to a previous phase that included the accent walls or where it's really an appropriate design. the challenge with it is the concrete looks great until a car happens to run into it, which seems to happen fairly frequently. And then trying to patch the concrete wall or replace it in kind is difficult. So that's the one downside with the trees with accent walls prototype. These last three are sort of variations on a similar theme. We have trees with check dams and planting pockets. This is one that we use a lot on medians that have a lot of slope to them. So we use boulders to create what we call check dams that basically help to slow down runoff and collect any stormwater that falls within the median behind these sort of dams of boulders. That's a place where we might normally see erosion problems. So we use those check dams to help slow down and prevent some of that damage from erosion. The next one, trees with cobble accents, is again a little bit more of an informal grouping of trees. You could call this a little bit more naturalistic layout, using the cobble accents to sort of create a dry stream bed feature. And then the last one is trees with angled check dams. So this is kind of maybe a hybrid of the last two. That we don't have as significant or large a check dam with this. We do use some boulders to create some small areas of water impoundment, but it's really more of a design aesthetic or visual thing than a functional thing. So Erin, let's go ahead and go through the rest of these. We'll zoom in on each of these next and look at them kind of one by one in a little more detail. Trees with vertical shrubs, you can see this is sort of an enlarged version. You'll notice on all of these that we have what we call pods. So we use a 200-foot module or pod where we have the room to do a larger pod. And then on smaller medians, we might use a single 60-foot pod or a combination of two 60-foot pods. So you can see by using these sort of small and large modules, we can really lay out a median like shown in the top with a variety of different pods sort of working together. So you can see on top we have a 60-foot pod, then a 200-foot pod, then two 60-foot pods together, another 200-foot pod and a 60-foot pod. So it gives us sort of a kit of parts that we can use to kind of put these things together. Let's go ahead and go through the next one, Erin. So trees with shrub accents, you can see in these a little more detail on what's happening with the understory plants. And these are a little bit more regimented lines or groupings of trees that are uniformly spaced, and these cobblestone accents with shrubs in between the groupings of trees only within the 200-foot pod. And then we have small groupings of smaller accent trees within the 60-foot pods. So this, again, is more emphasizing the trees with smaller sort of clusters of intensely planted accent areas. Let's go to the next one, Erin. The trees with formal accents. So this, you can see those very regimented or organized lines of shrubs, which look nice in plan view. But again, if any of those plants either outgrows the others or one of them dies, you might not have as uniform a look. So if we choose this one, we usually try to narrow it down to some specific plants that we know are more likely to perform better over time in this kind of arrangement. All right, Erin, let's go to the next one. Trees with planting pockets. So this one, the groupings of trees are a little bit more irregular in the both pods, really, in the 200 and the 60-foot pod. Instead of having sort of groups of 3 trees next to each other, we mix up the trees, the shade trees with the accent trees in a little bit more irregular arrangements. We have a longer, narrow cobblestone accent that links the groups of trees and also includes some clusters of plantings. So this is a little bit more broad as far as the number of plants. Instead of being clustered just around a small group, they're spread out along a longer length. Let's go ahead and look at the next one. Trees with accent walls. So you can see there's a section on the lower right-hand corner that shows a cross-section of what that wall would look like. And so it's a concrete wall that really runs down the median. It's a nice design motif, but again, what we've found is we try to use this only where it's appropriate, where there's already an existing accent wall prototype in place and that we're trying to match, because otherwise the walls tend to have potential for getting hit by cars. Occasionally they do get tagged by graffiti, so just becomes a little bit harder type of landscape to maintain for the city long term. Let's go ahead and look at the next one. All right, trees with check dam planting pockets. So you'll be able to see, and Erin, maybe you can sort of point to these on the screen where the check dams are located. So there are these sort of groupings of boulders that create almost this C or U shape along the median, where if water was flowing in the downhill direction, we'd want to sort of cup that and collect it. So again, it's more of an erosion control protection type function. We still are using shade trees in these sort of regular groupings of 3 in this particular prototype median. And we take advantage of those check dams to put some plants surrounding those boulders. One of the things that we haven't mentioned, but all of these medians do include what we call an inverted crown. So they are graded to slope towards the middle. We're not collecting water off the streets in most cases, but we do collect every inch of water that falls within the median. So that's good for the plants. It also is beneficial for the stormwater. It helps to clean that stormwater as it percolates through the ground. And we take advantage of what little rainfall we get here in the desert to put it to beneficial use for those plants. Let's go ahead and look at the next one, Erin. Trees with cobble accents. So this is sort of a hybrid of the last 2 that we've seen. We do have some smaller check dams, so they're not quite as large, but again, can serve the same function of helping to slow down some stormwater and prevent erosion damage, creating some pockets to plant in. In this version, we've got a little bit more irregular shape or pattern of the plantings compared to the prior one. Let's go ahead and look at I think the last one here. Trees with angled check dams. So again, a variation on that check dam theme where we're angling these check dams and sort of alternating from one side to the other of the median. This creates some visual interest, but also does provide a little bit of function with collection of stormwater on some of those downslope type medians. In this case, we're trying to group the shade trees together a little bit more irregularly than some of the others. Again, sort of a more naturalistic visual look to this median. So questions, I know we went through those kind of quickly and there's a lot of them and there's a lot of similarities between them, but do you have any specific questions, Mr. McNabb?
Basically one, and this is not just you guys, it's anything dealing with the government and government contracts, what have you. Do you buy your products outright or they supply, or do you make your own products, or just how do you go about that?
So all of these contracts are run through what's called non-call contracts. So the contractor has already provided pricing. In fact, their pricing is based on a pod. So they've got a price for each prototype and each pod size. So they've got a 200-foot pod price that includes everything that they would install as part of that. The contractor purchases all of the materials themselves, installs them, and then warranties their installation for that extended 2-year period. So the city pays the contractor for it, but ultimately the contractor supplies it.
Okay, now whoever the contractor may be, are you guys one of the contractors, or do you oversee what the contractors are doing out there?
That's a good question. So we are just consultants. We're designers. We don't do any construction. We're just landscape architects. So we do the design work for these projects, and then we oversee or observe the construction and make sure that it's being installed per the contract and per the city specifications and standards for construction for this type of work. We do that with the help of DMD, so Anthony Villanueva, who's the project manager, myself and Erin and other folks in my office. We have weekly or bi-weekly meetings out there during construction to monitor the construction. There's certain aspects of construction that require city approval before they're accepted. So we make sure that we're providing oversight to the contractor, making sure that all the work is being
So
installed per spec.
there is a board of review before the contract is actually approved and accepted and the work is started, correct?
Yeah, so the process for that would be before the work gets started. And actually, let me take maybe a step back. After tonight's meeting, what we'll do is take the outcome of this where we will have selected, or you will have selected one of these designs and selected the plants for the design. We will then go and fit this prototype to these specific medians and come up with a design after checking the clear site to make sure that there's no vehicle conflicts and that sort of thing. We'll deliver to the contractor a set of drawings that they use to price the plan set. So they have their pre-approved pricing that the city's already approved. They just plug the quantities from our plans into their pricing and it sort of spits out a number at the end. Then we review that pricing with the city and say, looks like they missed something here. Let's have them correct this, or, you know, it looks good. We think you should approve it. So we offer our recommendation to approve it once we get to a place where we're in agreement with what the contractors proposed. And then the city will sign off on a work order, and that authorizes the contractor to actually start the work.
Well, I'm just checking. You guys have been around a long time. Like I say, I have a lot of questions, and you know, I see it. I see a lot of work out there that needs to get done. Thank God the city is moving along with the funding, and I want guys that's gonna tell me up front whether it's a good deal or a bad deal, and that's what you just told me. So we can go on with the next one. I want to also, it's not your problem, but I'm concerned about the lighting in some of these areas because, like I say, the pedestrian rate is so high as far as, say, fatalities are right now, which is one of my pet peeves and prime objective in becoming a part of the community here. So, and I don't know, we can go on to the next thing.
Yeah, and I think you know, Mark can maybe speak to lighting, that there are opportunities for lighting improvements on streets projects, and maybe Mark, you can speak to what the process for those are. I haven't looked at the lighting on Irving myself, but I assume there's, you know, if there's concerns about lighting, there's a process to be able to evaluate that.
Sure, Mr. McNett, just get with Susan and she'll get with me and we'll get with our traffic engineering division, which is a separate division from mine. And we can go out there and see if there's any improvements we can do.
Well, I'll probably start worrying you guys as much as I worry Miss Susan there, Miss Borregos and the mayor and all them. But in any case, I'm glad to meet you guys, and I want to work with you towards the goals that we are setting out to achieve here. So you'll be hearing from me.
Sounds great.
Yes,
Okay.
that's what we're here for.
Okay.
So I was just going to add, well, two things. The first is that lighting on medians being constructed on West Side Boulevard is included. And then my other comment was, which of these median designs is best, excuse me.
That's all right.
Is best suited to the width of the Irving medians? Because you said they're quite wide. And also, I believe that they're at a downhill angle.
Yeah. So they are quite wide and they are downhill. So I think that from our perspective, one of these that includes the check dams would be a wise choice because it would help to slow down any of that runoff that collects, especially in those longer. There's a good stretch that's got a long median. That's one where I think that stormwater could potentially be an issue over time. You know, the west side has a lot of these sort of sandy, gravelly soils that are prone to erosion. So we would recommend one of the, I guess there's probably 3 that include check dams. One of the things I will point out is the contractors have had a hard time getting a lot of boulders lately. So maybe Erin, you can go back a couple to look at the one with check dam planting pockets. That one, although it's a nice median, includes a lot of boulders. And I think we can achieve a similar effect by picking one of the other two that includes check dams. Let's look at the next one, Erin. So that one has these sort of smaller check dams. And then the last one with the angled check dam. So I would say probably of all of these, those last three would be the ones I'd probably focus on as being most appropriate for this project. But that being said, it is up to the neighbors to choose. So we certainly are here to facilitate, but not pick for you. So Erin, let's go ahead and look at the next one. I think the next slide really sort of recaps these options, the first four that we looked at, and then the second four. In spite of what I said, Mr. McNatt, do you have a preference for any of these designs? Are there some that you prefer?
It's not exactly the design I'm concerned with. You guys do your workup, what you're going to present to the council and all those guys involved. What I am also concerned with is that if you say you're having a problem getting boulders, then do you have a secondary design that would include something else other than boulders?
Yeah, and what I would say about that is we just installed one with this check dam with planting pockets, which includes a lot of boulders on Ladera between Unser and Gavin. And it didn't slow the project down tremendously, but it did slow it down maybe by a week because they had to supply these boulders that were in larger quantities than I think some of these others include. I would say boulders are an important aspect of this. A couple of reasons why. One is they provide some visual interest when some of the plants aren't doing anything, like in the winter time when some of the plants have gone dormant. The boulders really help anchor some of these designs. So we want to make sure we stick with some that include some boulders. I just don't want to get overboard. So my suggestion would be picking one of these maybe last two that includes sort of does include some check dams, but a smaller quantity of boulders in general.
Well, I'm just concerned about that. I know in any part of the industry and business, when there's a shortage of something, generally it drives the price up per unit or however you guys rate that. So I'm just always a little concerned about that. There's a lot of money floating around, and my characteristics, my instincts tells me, as I've always done, to check, and double check twice. Make the dollar work for you, not against you.
And I think that's a great instinct. In this case, the price for those boulders is pre-established for this contract. So even if there is a difficult time getting them, the contractor has to honor the price that they provided to the city. And it really isn't, it's not a shortage to the extent that they can't find them anywhere, like some of the shortages we saw earlier last year with COVID.
Right.
Household goods. It's really just a matter of their supplier had a hard time keeping up with the pace that they were working at. This contractor is very methodical, and you'll see when they get started on this work that it'll go like clockwork. So I think that in this case, there's no concern with price, and really shouldn't be a concern with schedule. I just thought I'd mention it because I do think it'd make the project go a little faster if we had if we choose one of those that has a little bit fewer boulders.
That makes all the sense in the world to me. I'm looking forward to meeting some of your contractors.
Okay, excellent.
Okay.
I was just going to add that once it's aired, once your video is shared with some other people that aren't able to attend tonight, you might have a few more suggestions. But there is a neighborhood in the area that's Stone Ridge, I think it's called, that would have that Cobble accent also on their neighborhood wall. Just put that out there. So I like your Cobble accents for that reason, but I'd rather hear what the people input.
Okay, well, thanks for sharing that one. That Susan, I think that with what we normally do is open this up to a vote to all the participants. Since Mr. McNatt, you're it. Do you have a particular vote for any of these options?
Well, like I say, you guys are the professionals. I'm quite sure there's more you got to do to put together the package you wish to present. And that's when I will have the most to say about it. You may see the advantage of having one compared to the other, which you have did a very good job of explaining, at least to me. I don't know what happened to the rest of the people in the neighborhood where they're at, but and once you get that together, then that's the next phase of where we're headed. So
Okay.
I can either say yes or no. When I see what you're seeing, I mean, they've been very nice down there at the city councilor's office. I come in and use the conference room or whatever I need when I need. And when that time comes, I'm quite sure they have a place for us to discuss this. Okay.
Okay. Well, I think I would propose then, just I'll make a motion, if you will, that I think the trees with cobble accents, this sort of second one from the bottom, is a good compromise between. It does have a good number of boulders, but not too many in my view. It also has what I think is a nice mix of plant sizes and varieties that we can pick from. So that would be my recommendation, my professional recommendation. I don't know if anyone else from the team has any other thoughts, either Anthony or Mark or Susan, if you've got any suggestions based on some of the feedback you've heard from the neighborhood. Mark,
No, I think that's a great suggestion, Brian.
Yeah, just due to the slope that it has going down the hill, we need some type of check dams there to slow down that water. And I think the trees with cobble accent would be a perfect prototype for this one.
Okay. Susan, do you have anything to add or any?
No, I like that one also. So.
Okay. Oh, Susan, you're muted.
So I like that it has a lot of variety that can be included in the heights and in the plantings as well.
Yeah, it's got a good number of plants that we can use. So, and that's a nice segue to our next item. So if no one else objects, I think we'll go forward with the trees with cobble accents as the design for this prototype. The next part is kind of the fun part, I think, where we get to get into the plants.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Other people will be writing in, maybe give it a week, before you make a firm.
Okay, sure.
So we'll get you some comments.
Yeah. So I think that's sort of our recommendation, but we'll take comment following this meeting. And if there's a consensus approach that's different, we can certainly shift gears. What's nice about these prototypes is really we can sort of interchange different prototypes with different plants that we select. So the next part of this is, and let's go to the next slide, Erin, we'll start looking at the actual plant material that we would include within.
Oh man, that's beautiful.
So yeah, like I said, this is kind of the fun part where we get to pick a number of trees of each type and category. So we can start with the shade trees, which we have here. And for this particular prototype, we would really like to choose 3 of the shade trees. So 3 from this board that you see, or this slide that you see here on the screen. I can sort of talk through some varieties of pros and cons, I guess, of these different plants, if you'd like. Really, again, we're focusing mostly on shade with these trees. So they're going to be larger trees, generally ranging in size from 30 to even up to 50 foot in height. Although in the medians, we see them frequently sort of not quite achieve their full growth potential as they would in maybe, say, your garden or in a park. But these are good sized shade trees that will contribute to cooling the urban environment, helping with carbon sequestration, cleaning the air, and just overall beautification of the city. So I'll start with the Accolade Elm on the left. That's going to be probably one of our largest trees. It gets to be potentially up to 40 or 50 feet in height and about 30 to 40 feet in diameter. It is an elm variety. It's not the sort of elms that we all think of, the Siberian elms that pop up all over, including in cracks in the sidewalk throughout Albuquerque. These are well behaved improved elm varieties that are selected specifically for certain characteristics. All of these elms that we show here on this screen have a resistance to Dutch elm disease and Japanese elm beetles. So they're very hardy trees. They're very good in the urban environment, and really quite proven in our climate. So they've been being used quite a bit over the last several years, and we've put quite a few of them on median projects throughout the city with a lot of great success. So this Accolade Elm is a variety of Japanese elm. It's got sort of that classic vase-shaped elm habit, which is more of a park-like tree. It's got a yellow fall color. So that one is probably its biggest characteristic. It's going to get to be nice and big. With these wider medians, I think that would be an appropriate shade tree to put here. I wouldn't have any concerns about using it on this project. The next one would be the Frontier Elm. This is actually a variety of it's a hybrid of a Chinese elm and a smooth-leafed elm. One of the advantages is it has no seeds, so it doesn't have a lot of litter that it creates. It's got a smaller growth habit, certainly, than the Accolade Elm. It'll get to be maybe 30 to 40 foot height and about 30 foot spread. It does still have that sort of classic elm vase or oval growth habit. One of the big advantages, and you can sort of see it in the inset photo below, is it's one of, or if not the only elm that has red fall color. So it's unique in that regard. The next one on the list here, the lace bark elm, is a Chinese elm cultivar. The reason it's called lace bark is, as you can see again in that inset photo, it's got this very cool sort of mottled peeling bark, hence the name lace bark. It's sort of got a brownish rust color to the trunk. A very nice, fast-growing elm, and it's got sort of yellow to orange fall color. But it's going to be a little bit smaller than the others. It'll probably be cap out at about 30 feet height and 25 to 30 foot in width. The Shumard oak is, I think, the only oak that we have on our lists. So it's a little bit more slow growing tree, but it's a very stately tree. As you can see from this photo, it's got a nice sort of pyramidal or broadly oval growth habit. Has shiny green leaves with that nice deep oak leaf lobe. So you'll definitely recognize the leaf if you were to see it as an oak leaf. It doesn't usually produce acorns until it's older, and when it does, they're very small, so it's not really a concern as far as litter. And it has a nice brownish red fall color, as is shown in this photograph here. Moving down to the next line, we have a couple of ash trees. These are really the only ash trees that we are planting for the city. Ash was planted a lot in Albuquerque for a lot of years, but they have problems with pests. And so these two are some of the more resistant to the borers and the other pests that are attacking some of the other ash that you see in town, where they've got a lot of limb loss or leaf loss on damaged or infested limbs. So the urbanite ash, as the name implies, is very sort of urban friendly. It's built for the tough urban environment. It's used as a street tree in a lot of big urban areas like New York City and places like that. It's tolerant of the harsh conditions that we experience here in the medians with emissions and reflected heat. It's got a nice dark green leathery type leaf in summer, and then turns this nice bronze fall color. We have had some problems getting these in the past, so sometimes we have to substitute it with another close relative, which is called autumn purple ash. Really, the only difference between the urbanite and the autumn purple is that, as the name implies, instead of turning this sort of orangey bronze color in the fall, autumn purple turns purple in the fall. So those ash trees are a nice variety. The Raywood ash is the other variety that we've been planting in the city. It's got a little bit more dense crown and it's a little bit more upright growth habit, as this photo shows, than the urbanite ash. It does have narrower, finer textured leaves, so it's got a little bit finer leaf appearance to it compared to the urbanite ash. And it's got a nice reddish to reddish purple fall color. The Sensation box elder. So box elder is actually in the maple family. So it has that nice sort of 3-lobed maple leaf. This is one of the few sort of maple family trees that does well in Albuquerque. They're very hardy, very tough, very drought resistant. It's got this kind of pyramidal growth habit and brilliant reddish to orange fall color. That's probably its best characteristic. Chinese pistache is another one that you've probably seen around town. They're very hard to miss in the fall when they turn this bright, brilliant red color like is shown in this photograph. Throughout the rest of the year, when they're young, they're a little awkward looking, but as they fill out, they fill out into these very beautiful rounded growth habit trees, very dense foliage. It's got fine leaves, so it's got some sort of nice texture when the wind blows through it. Really one of my favorite trees. Some of the trees do produce fruit, which is nice for habitat for birds. But we don't see that on all the trees. It's sort of dependent on conditions and whether there's male and female in the same area. But it's one of the most drought tolerant trees. That's a tree that's very popular for that reason throughout Albuquerque. And then the last shade tree that we have here is probably one of the bigger ones. It rivals the Accolade Elm as far as size. Gets up to be 40 feet plus in height and 30 foot plus in width. It's Western hackberry. It's very tolerant of urban conditions. It does have this sort of rough, corky looking bark, which is sort of interesting, and then a yellow fall color. The Western hackberry also does sort of suffer from the same problem that Chinese pistache does. When it's young, it looks a little awkward, but as they grow and mature, they grow into nice, fine looking trees. So we have a total of, let's see, 9 trees here to choose from. We need to pick 3 of them. Do you have any preferences, Mr. McNatt?
Well, first of all, because of the trees I've seen around here, they are beautiful. But my concern, after you've explained the care and the upkeep and all that stuff, is how often did the average one of these trees have to be trimmed, especially the red looking ones?
That's a good
all
question.
Of them.
So most of these trees, by the time we plant them from the nursery, they're 2-inch caliper. They should have developed a good growth habit where they don't require a lot of sort of structural pruning. During that first 2 years, while the contractor's maintaining it, if there is any pruning that's required, they'll take care of it. And then when it gets handed over to the city to maintain, and Anthony, you can probably speak to this better than I can, but the city rarely has to do any pruning on these unless maybe a limb gets damaged in the wind or some sort of a storm like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we really don't prune the trees. We kind of leave them and let them grow at their natural state. We will trim them if we have to, like if it's a line of sight issue, or limb them up so you can see below the tree. If there is anything that is like in the roadway or whatever, we will trim that so it ain't damaging any cars or the tree. But we really typically don't trim the trees, and we let them grow in their natural state.
Yeah, most of these are selected because they don't require a lot of supplemental pruning after they're established.
Okay,
but that's a great question.
Now, all these trees are going in the medium, right?
Yes,
so
yes, sir.
There won't be any real visual problem as far as the drivers are concerned, in your opinion, will they?
No, in fact, when we lay these out, we make sure they're outside of and won't obstruct any clear sight lines for the drivers. As Anthony mentioned, we do make sure they're limbed up to a minimum height so that cars can see underneath any horizontal branches. Sometimes that can be a challenge with trees when they're young, but most of the stock that we get for these city medium projects are actually in excess of 2-inch caliper. So they're pretty large, mature trees, even when they go into the ground. They've been growing at the nursery for probably 8 to 10 years by the time they get into the median.
Okay, well, most of the trees you're showing me, I've had some privilege in seeing them around town, and I have a couple of choices. But one other question is, and each medium, does all the trees have to be the same, or can you choose a variety of tree for one medium and then another variety for another medium
That's a great
according to what's
question.
in there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we try to do, that's why we pick sort of, in this case, three, and most of the prototypes, we pick three different shade tree varieties. What we try to do is group them. So within a median, if we've got a group of three, we try to make sure those three are the same variety. But if we have some of these more informal groups, like this prototype that we are sort of leaning towards, we can definitely mix those up even within an individual median. So we'll balance them out. We try to make it, that's where we like to say we do our magic and try to make the selections that you all make tonight work for the median and for the surrounding landscape. So so yeah, we'll have once we select three of them, we won't just use those three sort of all in a single median. We'll sort of spread them out throughout the project.
Okay. Well, the first one I like for certain part, depending on the environment around there. That first one is, what is that? I get my glasses on. The first tree, the elm, that elm, depending on the environment around that area.
Okay. So we have three elms. The first three on the top, from the left, we have the Accolade Elm, the Frontier Elm, and the Lace Bark Elm. Is there any one of those three in particular you like the most?
The first one.
Okay.
The Accolade Elm.
Perfect.
Okay, and it got to be three, right?
Yes, sir.
Depending on the environment and, like I say, what's around it, the houses, whether they are single level homes or whether they're double level homes, and if there's no curves in that roadway where you're working at.
Right.
So my next one would be down at the end there as a choice. And me and my eyes, gotta make that out. All the way down at the end, the red looking one on that first line.
The first row. So the Shumard Oak.
Yeah, that one.
Okay.
Okay.
That's another great choice.
And the one just below that is so pretty in green. I'd love to see more green around here.
Okay.
The Western, what is that?
The Hackberry. Okay.
Yeah. So those three is what I would select, but like you say, the other neighbors got to say what they think also. Sure. So I'm just trying to give you something to go with.
Well, you get some benefit for being here and present on the meetings. So we'll take your votes and we'll record those.
Like I say, I have to do an awful lot of networking, and Susan has been a real champ. Miss Borregos have been a real champ, and the mayor's team have been a real champ as far as keeping me informed in where I should be, when I should be, and how I should see things. So, along with neighbors now, like on next door neighbor, they're very good about these type things, and they're getting more and more involved. Even though we don't see them here, I can see the involvement when I go out there because they talk about things.
Yeah. Well, it's important to have active neighbors for sure.
Yeah, that's the reason I want this new center so bad, so we can have a place to communicate and not be sitting in a corner at the substation.
Right.
So. Okay, next.
Okay, let's go to the next slide, please, Erin. We'll look at accent trees next. So this is a smaller group of trees to choose from, but we'd like to pick two. And there's nothing magic about that. If you have your heart set on three, we can pick three and make it work. So these are going to be a little bit smaller trees for the most part, under 30 foot. Most of them sort of range from 20 to 25 foot in height and width. So I'll go through these kind of quickly. On the top left, we've got the ornamental pear. So that's a very nice tree. Most of these accent trees, as the name suggests, have some sort of feature that is an accent that we're not looking for a lot of shade benefit, but some sort of other feature. So ornamental pear has a couple of nice features. One is it's got these beautiful white flowers in the spring, and then it's got nice red purple fall color in between. It's got, during the summer, it's got these nice green leaves. So you kind of get really 3-season attraction from this plant. You got the spring flower, the nice green foliage in the summer, and then that red to purple fall color in the fall. The flowers obviously are going to attract pollinators and wildlife and birds and things. So that's always a beneficial aspect of most of these trees as well. The next one, golden rain tree, is a really nice tree. We usually install these. They're locally grown mostly as a multi-trunk tree. This one in this photograph, it's kind of hard to tell, but it's actually got sort of 2 or more trunks at the base, and so it's got that nice sort of feature. It has a little bit different growth habit because of that. It has nice green foliage, yellow flowers in the spring, these sort of panicles of flowers that you can see in the photo, that then turn to these very interesting sort of paper seed pods in the late summer and early fall. And so that's a nice ornamental tree that kind of has some, again, 3-season entrance. It's got some spring color, nice green foliage in the summer. Actually, I'd even call it 4-season interest, because after the seeds fall off in the fall, the trunk and the pattern of the trunk being that multi-trunk growth habit has some interest in it, even when it doesn't have foliage on it. And that tree gets to be about 25 foot in height at full maturity and 20 feet wide. The Canada Red Chokecherry, this is an interesting tree. It leaves out, the leaves are green when they first come out in the spring, and then it turns to this sort of purple color in the summer. It does have, as the name suggests, small fruit, chokecherries, but they're very small, really only noticeable to the birds. They rarely even fall to the ground, because the birds usually eat them all off the trees before they make it to the ground. So it does have some wildlife habitat, and it's an interesting smaller tree. It's going to be, again, in that same sort of 25 foot height to 20 foot spread at ultimate maturity. Washington Hawthorne is the next one on the right hand side of the top row. This one is also a multi-trunk tree, similar to the golden rain tree. The interesting thing about the hawthorn, it has spring flowers that are white, and then it will have this nice foliage in the summer, but also puts on these red berries that are attractive to wildlife. And those berries will persist through the winter, so they'll have some winter interest as well on this tree, as long as the birds haven't eaten them all. The one thing to note about this tree, it's not really important since we're putting it in the median, but it does have very long thorns, so it's something we don't usually plant in areas where there's a lot of people nearby, but in the median it's well suited for that location. It's got an orange to red fall color. Going down to the next row, we've got another elm. This one's a little bit smaller. It's called the Emerald Sunshine Elm. It has a more upright growth habit. The leaves come out in the spring, sort of this coppery bronze color, and then they turn glossy green in the summertime. It's a fast-growing elm and very drought tolerant, and it does have yellow fall color. So really, this is probably more of a 2-season interest tree. It doesn't have any remarkable flowers or fruit. The next one, Crusader Hawthorne. So it's a relative of the Washington Hawthorne, but this one's a little bit smaller, 20-foot height by maybe 15-foot spread. This one's thornless. They're often grown as a multi-trunk, just like the Washington Hawthorne. They have the same sort of white flowers in the spring and red berries in the fall, or in the summer, that persist through the fall, and same bright orange fall color. It's just a little bit smaller stature tree. Eastern Redbud is the last one of the accent trees on the lower right-hand corner. It's got a very attractive spring flower that's purple, very brilliant sort of purpley pink flowers. They're all in bloom, a lot of them right now, in fact. And then they have a nice green glossy foliage in the summer, and they will have a yellow fall color. So again, we'd like to pick two or three of these accent trees to include throughout the median. Do you have any questions about any of them or preferences for any of these?
Not at this time. The last one you just spoke of,
Yes.
that one interests me. The one next to it interests me.
Okay.
And then the one let me make sure yeah, those three, and the one next to that, they all interest me. If you notice, they have some type of, no, that's not right. I got 1, 2 at the end on the bottom.
Okay.
And then this one right here, the second one on the top row, that interests me.
So the golden rain tree on the top row.
Right.
And then looks like the Crusader Hawthorne on the bottom and the Eastern Redbud on the bottom. Okay.
Correct.
Excellent.
Yes. I'm thinking about people that have 2-level houses. If they have 2-level houses, it's a good idea sometime to be able to see what's going on the other side of the road.
Sure.
So, okay.
All right. Well, those are good choices. Let's move on now, Erin, to the next one. So we'll skip this one because we're not using vertical shrubs. We'll go next to the large shrub category. Excuse me. And we'll pick from the large shrubs. We'd like to pick 3 or 4 of these. So again, sort of thinking about some of the color selections that we've used for other plants and maybe textural variety here. I'll go through these kind of quickly. Apache Plume is more of a desert native plant. It will be evergreen, so it's got, well, evergray sort of green foliage. It does have these nice white flowers with these sort of funky seed heads on them that are really interesting. If you see them up close, when you're driving by on the median, you don't notice them that much, but they do have a nice sort of spray of color in the summer, and they will be evergreen. So that's a nice feature of that plant. And it's native. It really does well in drought conditions, so it doesn't require a lot of extra care. The next one, the red leaf barberry. This is, as the name suggests, it has some red foliage. It does, it will lose its leaves in the winter, so it is deciduous. It's not an evergreen. It's pretty tolerant of the harsh urban conditions, so it's a good choice for the medians. And it does have some red berries that will persist through the winter. So even though it loses its leaves, as long as the birds haven't eaten them all, you'll see some of those red berries through a portion of the winter. The next one, red yucca, is another sort of desert accent type plant. It's not native to New Mexico, or at least to Albuquerque area, but it is native to the Southwest. It's got those beautiful red to pink flowers on these sort of long stems, and it's sort of a clump of leathery gray-green foliage. So that's a nice plant. They're very hardy, very tough in the median. The next one is lead plant. And by the way, all these large shrubs sort of are in that maybe 3 to 5 foot range. So Apache Plume is going to be about 5 by 5. The barberry is going to be about 4 by 4. Red yucca will be about 3 foot by 3 foot. The flower stalks stick up a little bit higher. Lead plant's the next one, and it's about the same size, about a 3 by 3 growth habit. It has these nice long stems that have these fine grayish green oval leaves, and it has long purple flower spikes in mid to late summer. It is deciduous, so it'll lose all its leaves in the winter, but in the summer when it's flowering, it's quite attractive. The next one is a banana yucca, which is another desert accent. This is native to New Mexico in the Southwest. It's got these very sort of sharp sword-like leaves. So again, we don't like using this type of plant in a very narrow median where the guys are trying to work in a very narrow space, but in a median like this plant would be fine. It's got clusters of white flowers, as you can see in the photograph, that are quite attractive in mid to late summer, and it will be evergreen. Or ever sort of gray blue, I guess you could say, is the color of the leaves. Going down to the next row, the Turpentine Bush is another desert accent. It's got bright yellow flowers in summer and this dark green foliage throughout the rest of the year. It'll kind of turn gray-green in the winter, but it is evergreen, and it's very drought tolerant. It's a compact sort of 3 foot by 3 foot growth habit, like a lot of the others in this category. Blue Mist is really selected because it's got some very beautiful blue flowers, as the name suggests, throughout the summer. Really mid to late summer is when it comes in bloom. Again, kind of similar foliage to lead plant, to that gray green. It's a little bit darker green than the lead plant, but it's got these nice clusters of flowers that are pretty attractive, not only to our eyes, but also to all the pollinators. And it's pretty tough. It tolerates a lot of harsh conditions. We use them in the medians quite a bit. The next one is another desert accent, Sotol. Sometimes it's called desert spoon. So this is has sort of similar to the banana yucca, or maybe it's sort of in between banana yucca and red yucca. It's got a little bit finer, narrower leaf, more densely compact within the plant, but it's got a serrated edge to the leaf, so it's not nice to rub up against. So again, this works well in these wider medians, but not so much in narrow medians. It will have you don't see it in the photograph, but it will produce periodically these flowers in the summertime that are long, tall spikes that are sort of a green, lime green color. So it's a little different than the very showy banana yucca flower. It's maybe less visually attractive, but it is attractive to a lot of pollinators. Let's see. And of course it is evergreen. So it'll be gray, green, blue, green all year long. The next one is 3-leaf sumac. This is a nice plant that is native to the mountain areas of New Mexico. It's not so much a desert native, but more of a foothills native. It's got glossy dark green leaves that are 3-lobed, so it's pretty distinct looking. It's got arching branches that when the leaves turn in the fall, they will turn this sort of orange to rust color, and sometimes even brilliant red. And it does have clusters of red berries in the fall and very small, tiny clusters of flowers that aren't really noticeable, but at least visually noticeable when you're driving by on the median, but they are definitely noticeable to the pollinators. And then last but not least, we have a miniature butterfly bush. Again, as the name implies, it's attractive to butterflies and other pollinators. It's got these very large blue sort of flower spikes on these arching branches. This one's a miniature, not a dwarf, but a miniature variety. So it really stays in a kind of nice, compact 3 to 4 foot growth habit, which is well suited for the median. It doesn't outgrow its space. And it's deciduous, so it'll lose its leaves in the winter. So we do have a variety of sort of evergreen and deciduous plants here. I would suggest that's probably good as we start going through the shrubs to think about that balance. It's nice to have something that's doing something in the winter. So picking, at least one evergreen out of each of these categories is usually our recommendation. But there's sort of some variety here. There's some natives. If you wanted to go with a more native landscape, you might want to lean towards the Apache Plume or the red yucca or the banana yucca, Sotol. Or if you're really wanting to go to something that really invites a little bit more color and interest and also has the ancillary benefit of attracting pollinators, some of these flowering varieties would be good choices. So we'd like to pick from this category 3 to 4 plants. Do you have any preferences here?
The butterfly bush.
Okay. Yes.
The one on top of it is the banana yucca.
Yes.
Okay. I like this color in this one right here. The blue, what is that? Blue
mist?
Blue mist, yes.
Okay.
And the one next to it for color as well, right on the left-hand side.
Bush. Okay.
Right.
Good.
Those are the ones that I would work with.
Okay, I like that. It's a good mix. Good mix of colors and textures and sizes. So I think that'll work well.
Yeah.
So I was just going to ask and chime in, and actually I needed to recommend pretty much the same ones that Mr. McNatt did. So that was coinciding.
Good.
But is the banana yucca the New Mexico yucca? Is that the same thing?
This one is the actual scientific name of it is Yucca baccata. So it's sometimes called by different names. I've not heard it called New Mexico yucca, but it is native to New Mexico.
Just for the pollinator species that.
Yeah, so it would be Yucca baccata, Baccata, I believe is the spelling. Yeah, Baccata, Yucca baccata. All right, well, let's move on now next to the small shrubs. Thank you, Erin. So as the name suggests, these are a little bit more compact, a little bit smaller. So when we combine these with the large shrubs, we get some different visual interest. We always like to remind people, think about what you just selected from the large shrubs, because there are some similarities, and we generally want to try and embrace some variety here. So I'll go through these. Cherry sage is the first plant on the upper left. This one is also known as autumn sage. It's got these nice red flowers, very attractive. We use this in the median pretty successfully, more so than we do in situations where there's a lot of foot traffic. These plants tend to get trampled if they're next to paths in parks and that sort of thing. So the median's actually a nice environment for them because there's usually not a lot of people walking through here. So cherry sage does well, produces these nice, brilliant red flowers. It's attractive to pollinators. It's sometimes considered semi-evergreen. It will sort of hold its leaves through the winter in mild winters. So it's got some other attractive features, like it's got this very nice sort of aromatic foliage, but we don't expect people to be noticing that when they're driving by at 30 miles an hour. So it's really more for the visual of the red flowers, but also the attractiveness to some of the pollinators. The next one, Hamlin fountain grass. We've got two fountain grasses here. You'll notice there's one in the top row and one second from the bottom right. These are very similar plants, but they're going to be kind of a dense mounding type grass or clump grass. They have this panicle of flowers that sort of looks like a bottle brush. The difference between the two, the Hamlin will have a more of a beige or buff color to it, whereas the Carly Rose is going to be a little bit showier with a little bit bigger flower stalks or seed stalks on the grass, and they turn a bit more of a pinkish to purplish hue. So grasses again are a nice textural variety. We would probably recommend selecting at least one grass for this project. So keep that in mind as we go through these. The next plant is hard to say, but I'll try to do it without twisting my tongue. Royal Gold Woad Waxin. It's actually it's a genista is the botanical name for it. This one's got dark green foliage with sort of small oval leaves. It's got these panicles of bright yellow flowers, as you can see in the photograph. It really blooms midsummer till fall, so June to like September. It's got this kind of mounding growth habit. It really only gets to be about 2 foot height, maybe by 3 foot around. So it's a nice sort of well-behaved shrub that has some nice visual interest with the yellow flowers in the summer. It is deciduous, so it'll lose all its leaves in the winter. The next one, Carl Forster grass. You've probably seen these around town. We've used a lot of them in the medians and a lot of other landscapes. They're pretty popular, mainly because they're pretty long-lived for grasses. A lot of grasses don't live to be more than maybe 5 or 10 years old, but in the medians, we've found these Carl Forster grasses have been quite long-lived, and they're very predictable. They're very narrow, upright. They have these nice seed heads. They sort of start out purple or reddish bronze in the spring, and then they turn this kind of buff color. And if they're left, if the seed heads are left on through the winter, they provide some winter interest. Sometimes they get cut down to the ground, and then they come back in the spring. But these are nice plants. They just provide a little bit of a vertical element. and sort of some visual interest with as the wind blows through the seed heads, they can be quite stunning. The next one is Grolo Sumac. So that's a relative of the 3-leaf sumac that we looked at on the large shrub side. As the name implies here, this is a little bit lower growing variety. It really only will get to be about 2 foot in height, but it spreads in sort of mounds like is shown in this photograph, to about 4 foot in diameter. It's got the same glossy dark green foliage as the regular 3-leaf sumac, same red berries, and sort of yellow to orange to red fall color. You know, we see a lot of variety in this plant. It can be sort of a not so stunning yellow, or it can be a really brilliant red. So that's another nice one. It is deciduous, so it'll lose all its leaves in the fall or in the winter. The next one on the lower left is dwarf nandina. This is a little bit more of a old-fashioned kind of garden plant, but we use it in the medians because it's got some nice features to it. One, it's practically indestructible. It's very hard, very hardy, very hard to kill. So it survives in the harshest of conditions. And then it's got some nice color interest. It sort of comes on as this sort of green foliage, and then it turns this sort of red color. And the red kind of increases as it goes throughout the season. And in a lot of climates and winters here, even in Albuquerque, it'll maintain its foliage throughout the winter. So it provides some winter interest. It also has flowers in the spring and red berries that persist through the winter. So it provides some visual interest there as well. But it's a dwarf variety, so it won't get to be very big. It's only about a 3 foot at most height and probably about a 2 foot spread. It's a little bit more of an upright growth habit. The next one, dwarf rabbit brush, is also more commonly known as chamisa. So that's a native. This one's a dwarf variety, so it'll stay a little bit more compact than the larger, more rangy chamisa that you might be familiar with. This one only gets to be about 2 foot tall and wide. It has green foliage or gray-green foliage, and then these yellow flowers in late summer, early fall. It is deciduous, but the flower, the stems and the seed heads from the flowers can persist through winter, so it does have some visual interest if it isn't cut back. Curly rose fountain grass we already talked about. That's really very similar to the Hamlin fountain grass, just a little bit different flower color or seed head color. And then the last one is another ornamental grass called Alkali Sacchaton. It's another clump forming grass, kind of similar to Carl Forster in size, but it's, as you can see in the photo, it's less sort of upright vertical, a little bit more upright vase shaped, but it's still only about maybe, I'd say 3 foot height by 2 foot spread at the base, and it sort of bows out to maybe 3 foot at the top. It's got these sort of longer or taller panicle-like or plume-like flowers that have kind of a beige to pink tinge to them, but it's very drought tolerant and tough, so it does well in the medians. So with that, I think we'd like to select from this group 5 of these plants. So really, since we have 9 to choose from, it might be easier to pick which 4 you don't like, but we can pick which 5 you do like too. Either way is fine with us. Do you have any preferences?
Number 1, the cherry, was it sage?
Cherry sage, yes.
Okay.
That's a great one.
You say 5, right?
Yes, sir.
What is that? That second one from the last at the end on the top, Carl, what is that, Forster?
The Carl Forster grass, yep.
Okay.
That's a good one.
And the one next to it at the end on the top line.
Okay.
Was it Ceramac or something like that?
Grolo Sumac, yep.
Sumac, that one, okay.
Okay.
And down below that, directly below that, that pronunciation is beyond me, but
the grass there on the lower right, the Alkali Sacchaton.
That one.
Alkali Sacchaton. Okay,
Okay, how many I got so far?
that's 4. So we need
Okay.
one more.
Okay, give me a moment. Let me scan back. Let me scan back. I want them all to be in somewhat the same range. All right, the one next to it would be satisfactory also.
So the Carly Rose fountain grass.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good group. We can mix those and match those, and the nice thing is we can mix them up so that no 2 medians or no 2 sort of groups of plants look the same. So that's
Yeah.
a good variety. Susan, did you have any thoughts or anything to add based on some of the input
I
you've
was
heard?
just told that the Sacchaton that Mr. McNabb chose is a pollinator species. I'm sure
Excellent.
all of these have some pollinator qualities.
Yeah, a lot of them do. I think anything, because we're trying to have some visual interest that's appealing to us, it also appeals to a lot of those pollinators. So we're happy for that. Okay, excellent. So I think the last category that we have, and we're getting close to the end here, we're on the home stretch. So bear with us. Erin, let's go to the next slide and look through the perennials. So perennials are really going to be plants that provide some interest. You'll notice these all have some beautiful colors or features about them, but they're going to be kind of small. So we use them in little pockets where we can. Mostly we plant them next to boulders so that when they're not in bloom in the winter time, the boulders can kind of carry that space. They also provide a benefit. The boulders help warm up their roots in the spring a little bit earlier, so they can survive a little bit better. The boulders help hold water and moisture around these plants, so they don't have to rely as much on the irrigation. So there's a lot of advantages to sort of clustering these perennials around boulders, and with intermixed within some of the other plantings. So these will mostly, for the most part, die back to the ground. There's one exception, which is the autumn joy sedum, but for the most part, these are going to be mostly growing season activity, and then you won't really notice them. You might even think they're dead, but they'll come back in the spring. So we'll want to pick from this group 4 out of this group of 8, so half of these. So let me go through them real quick. Autumn joy sedum, and all of these are going to be fairly small. This one's going to be about 2 foot by 2 foot. It's almost like a succulent. It's got these thick sort of round leaves and blue-green foliage with these pink edges to the leaves. You probably won't notice that driving by, but that's a nice feature of that plant. And then it's got these clusters of flat-topped salmon or pink flowers, as the photo shows here, that turn this nice rust color in the fall. So that's why it's called autumn joy. The flowers and the foliage will sort of turn in the fall. This is considered a semi-evergreen in our climate. Some seasons it'll die back to the ground, but most seasons we see the leaves and even some of the flowers persist through the winter. So it carries some interest throughout the winter. The next one, creeping phlox, is quite a low growing plant. It really only gets to be about a foot in height, but it will spread to be about 2 foot wide. We try to cluster these in groups so that they kind of create a massing effect. So you sort of see this purple carpet where these are planted. They bloom very profusely in spring. There's a couple different color varieties. There's purple and white and pink. And it is deciduous, so it will die back to the ground. But while it's growing, it creates this kind of nice matte green carpet-like effect when it's not in bloom, and when it is in bloom, a nice sort of colorful carpet effect. The next one, blanket flower or gaillardia, is one of our favorites. It's a plant that really does well. It's very drought and heat tolerant in the median. It blooms, pretty much all summer long. It also will self-sow its seeds. So sometimes we'll plant these, and then after a few seasons, we'll see a few more of them pop up in areas where they're getting more water. So in areas where we've got these check dams, they might have an opportunity to kind of reestablish themselves, or spread into greater numbers in the median. It's fairly compact. It's only about 18 inches in width and height. and there's a variety of colors. Most of the ones that we've been getting have this sort of red center and yellow edges, but there's shades of purple, oranges, and reds. Depending on what's available from the nursery, we may switch it up from project to project. So that's a nice, very nice flowering perennial that we use. Globe mallow is one that is a native, and in fact, Gaillardia is also a southwestern native. Globe mallow is native really on the West Mesa. You can see it sometimes in the summertime after the monsoon rains come. It's got this gray-green foliage, and then it will have this profusion of sort of apricot colored or orange blooms in the summer. Really nice plant. It's pretty hardy and drought tolerant. Because it's native, we have seen some issues on some median projects, depending on the soil types where this has not been successful. But because of where we are on the West Mesa, and this is really sort of suited to that, I think this plant should be pretty successful in the medians on Irving. So that's one to consider. Going down to the second row, the Stella d'Oro daylily. This is kind of again, sort of a more classic, traditional type plant, but it's selected for a reason because it's pretty hardy, pretty tough in the medians, and it's got this nice kind of grass-like green foliage until the flowers come on, and then when the flowers bloom, it's got these beautiful bell-shaped tubular yellow flowers throughout the growing season. So a real nice plant. Again, it attracts lots of pollinators, and it's got a lot of visual interest in the summer. Same sort of size range. It's about a foot to 18 inches at most. The next one is another kind of lower growing ground cover. It's called Walker's Low Catmint. It is a low sprawling type plant, only gets to be about a foot tall, but it'll spread to around 3 feet. When the flowers bloom, it gets a little bit taller because those flower stalks send up, and it's oftentimes you see it covered in bees. The bees really like this plant. It's got clusters of those flowers that bloom throughout the summer, and it's pretty aromatic. Again, not something you would notice, but that's one of its features. And then the next two are both two different varieties of yarrow. The first one, the Greek yarrow, is going to be a lower growing variety. It's only about 6 inches tall, maybe about 18 inches wide. It's got these smaller clusters of white flowers and this kind of nice green vegetation. It's very drought tolerant. The other yarrow has got sort of a little bit more of a gray-green foliage and bigger, more compact clustered flowers. So they kind of create these almost flat-topped flower clusters that are yellow. Sometimes we get this in a white variety as well, but yellow is the more common. There are some other colors like red and purple, but yellow is definitely by far the most common that we use. And that will bloom throughout most of the summer. So we've got 8 to choose from. We'd like to pick 4. If you have your heart set on 5, we could go that route too. So what are your thoughts?
Well, on the bottom row, I take all 5 of those.
Okay.
Yeah, all 5 of them all the way across. 1,
Okay.
2, 3, 4, 5 on the bottom row.
Okay, so I think there's only 4 on the bottom. There's the daylily, the catmint, the yarrow, and the Greek yarrow, and the yellow yarrow.
Okay, so that would be 4 then.
Yes.
You only want 4, right?
We could go with 5 if there's one you like from the top row.
What is that? Cheating? What is that? Phlox or something like that?
Creeping phlox, yeah.
Creeping phlox. We have that one.
Okay.
Okay, that would be my 5.
Okay. All right. I think we've come to the portion where normally, we have to sometimes haggle and vote on these plants, but we've got unanimous consent from you, Mr. McNatt, on all of these. So thank you for that. We will appreciate any feedback, Susan, that you get from other neighbors on either the design or the plants. We can incorporate if somebody has their heart set on one of these plants that hasn't been selected, we can certainly add it to the mix. We have some flexibility with the number of medians that we're working with here and the prototype that we're working towards. So I think that that's gives us a good starting point. So the next steps after this really are, as we've discussed, we'll take the selections that you've made tonight and work them into a final design for the medians. Then we'll review that with the contractor, make sure he provides pricing and that his pricing is in order with what we've designed. And then I think the schedule right now, Mark and Anthony, correct me if I'm wrong, is we're going to try and have this one under construction early May. So it's a pretty quick turnaround. This is a priority for the city. The contractor has time in his schedule, which is sort of unusual. So we're going to jam this thing together and get it out there on the get it out there under construction very quickly. So you'll start seeing something happen very soon. Does anybody have any questions? Mr. McNatt or Susan, do you have any questions?
I only have one. I got Mark. I got you, Brian. Anthony.
Yes, sir.
Who you working with?
I'm working with DMD. I'm actually the project manager that will be overseeing this project taking place.
DMD.
Yes, sir.
And your full name is Anthony
Villanueva.
You're going to have to spell it slowly for me. I'm not good at spelling.
V is in Victor.
Okay.
I-L-L.
Okay.
A-N.
Okay.
U-E.
U-E.
V is in Victor.
V is in Victor.
A.
A. Excellent. You're the only one that I was missing. Okay, guys. I've heard a lot. I've learned a lot. And I'll be waiting to see what your prototype is going to look like. And I have more to say about it then.
Well, thank you again, Mr. McNatt, for joining us tonight. We appreciate your time and your input and your interest in this project. And we're excited to be able to deliver it for you and your neighbors. We look forward to the day when it's finished and we can all go out there and look at it and celebrate it together.
Well, get one project done and start another one. Yeah, many
right.
more in the works. And right now, that's the reason I want to get to know you guys, because like I say, there's a long ways to go before I'll be totally where I want to be. Okay.
Yeah, we hear you. And we're happy to do whatever we can to help along the way. Susan, did you have anything you wanted to add before we adjourn?
I was just going to thank everyone. Mr. Vertical, it's very exciting that it will be ready by May. It's a great season to have something like this beautiful, as Mr. McNatt selections have indicated for the communities. And Mr. Villanueva, thank you all.
Right. Thanks again, everyone, and have a good rest of your evening, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay.
All right.
Thank all of you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
All right.
Bye-bye.
You too.
Bye-bye.